welcome to UniverSoul Women, and I'm Sherryl Lin.
And I'm Dr. Julie, and we are gathering to ignite radical cultural change. And speaking of radical cultural change, all of a sudden I'm fired up about something, Sherryl Lin, and yeah, so like I had an opportunity last night that I missed. I was in a meeting, and it was a Zoom meeting, so there were up to 20 people at one time on this screen, or 16 to 20. And it was evolutionary leaders. That was people showing up to do radical action on the planet, radical activism. They all have amazing big hearts, amazing calling to help the planet. And there was everything from focusing on the children to focusing on the environment. I mean, like, these were amazing people. And traditional gender roles were very prevalent. And I was noticing it, and I was noticing it, and I was noticing it, and I didn't do anything. So here's what was happening, Sherryl. Sherryl, do you mind if I call you Sherryl? Because I don't call you Sherryl Lin very often.
No, it's okay.
I love you, but you're my Sherryl. Okay, so gender roles. So we're on this meeting, and it's a Zoom meeting, and a woman called the meeting, a woman that's part of an organization, called the meeting to order, emailed, got the Zoom out, everything. And the male, the alpha male, when she asked, there were several men and women that were a part of this. And she had the duties of administrative skill. So you call the meeting to order, and then so the guy like takes charge of the meeting in a way, and then invites her to do administrative things, to, like, okay, well, are we okay with this? Did we do that? Did we, and so then he would come in to be the alpha male. And I watched it, and it's like, okay, so I often say we have to be careful not to put the new wine in the old skins. And here we were, and I was watching it happen, but it wasn't my meeting, and it wasn't my organization. And I don't know if maybe I'll have a conversation with them today and just point out how the women were treated and the men were treated within that organization. Now, they didn't treat the women that they invited into the meeting that way. Men and women weren't treated differently at all. But it was this, and it was kind of funny because on my screen, and it's different everywhere, but on my screen, the man was up in the top corner in the alpha position, and she kept moving and dwindling down. It was like this funny thing. Okay, so traditional gender roles and creating radical cultural change in the workplace and elsewhere. What do you think, Sherryl? What do you think?
A lot of it is us as women speaking up and speaking out. But there's something, it's interesting because I wasn't thinking that I would I didn't think of this example, but someone who I'm really close to, a man, he just fairly recently went through this thing at his work where he was investigated for gender discrimination. And when I was kind of coaching him about it, and trying to figure out what had happened, and what I realized was that he had this it was subtle on so many levels. He had such a deeply ingrained way of being with women, and actually kind of with people in general, because he actually kind of treated everyone. He kind of looked down at everyone in a certain way. But because of the environment where he worked, his staff was, I think, either all or almost all women, and he was in charge of managing the staff. And so, and in the climate of women speaking up finally, which is a good thing, they were scrutinizing every word that came out of his mouth and everything that that transpired during the workday. And they started gathering evidence against him that he was discriminating against women. So it was a big lesson for him, because he came to me and it was like, I don't even know how to like change it. Like, what am I doing? Can you help me? And when we looked at it, it was like, well, you do kind of, you in your language, you actually, even though you won't be overtly saying, you know, you don't know what you're talking about, you act like that. You act like, oh, you're just a woman, you don't know, or you're just, you know, in this lower position, or, you know, like, you know, I'm the one that knows, I get to make all the decisions. He's always been like that. And I said, that's like a core issue for you, but also for you as a man. Like, as a man, there's like, you've used your power in this way, and you can't do that anymore. You can't do that in a corporate setting where you are going to be, you just can't do that anymore. But it takes women speaking up. Now, the women, you know, from what I can see, and I didn't obviously hear their side of the story, but if they took it way too far. Like, they said certain things that he had said, you know, well, he was discriminating against me because I was a woman. And I was like, that's a stretch. Like, that statement. I'm trying to think of an example. Yeah, he came into a meeting, and people were getting all excited, but not in a good way. You know, they're getting riled up about something. And he was like, calm down, everyone. Let's not get hysterical. And they said that that was because it was women, and that he was calling women hysterical. Maybe, maybe not. If there had been men in there, would he have used the word hysterical? Maybe, maybe not. Who knows? But it was like they were really stretching to find evidence. But I'm sure they had some evidence that was very true. So that begs the question of like, how can we speak up? Because like, you know, now in retrospect, you're telling the story about what happened to you last night, right, Julie? And you're like, no, maybe it wasn't the appropriate time, especially if I don't know, were you new to this?
There's a lot of new, yeah.
Yeah. So if you were new to it, maybe you don't, you know, you were observing it, you know, the first time, you're kind of like, okay. And then it's like, is there something that can be effective that I could say to help shift the culture of that for the future? Because if you're going to be part of it, then you want to make sure that you know, you saw something, and it's if no one says anything, it's just going to keep being perpetuated, right? So how can we, question is, you know, what to say, when to say it, you know, how to do it in a way that actually is effective, instead of you know, because that just can have a different kind of backlash. So people get more tight-lipped, but they don't actually change inside. You know, this guy that I was talking about, he actually really did genuinely want to change it for himself. So, yeah.
When I think of this, I think of the, what's the right word? I'm just going to say contrast right now, because it's not the right word, but it'll help me describe this, is the responsibility we have in these little things, and the contrast between sexual harassment and misogyny and these little subtle things, like how we speak, how we relate energetically between. Like, it wasn't this huge big thing on the screen last night in my computer, but it was this old pattern. So like, you know, when do we speak up to make radical cultural change? If the little things don't matter, the big things won't change either. You know, like, it's really a systemic, endemic thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And the first thing is helping ourselves and conditioning ourselves to notice, because we're so used to it that we don't even notice a lot of times when this is happening. And the subtle, you know, this guy and I, we've known each other for a long time. And, you know, he said some things to me when I kind of looked back. I was like, yeah, you kind of look down at people, in general. And I didn't realize it until he had this dramatic, like knock on the head, like, you have to stop doing this.
Mm-hmm.
But I hadn't really, I kind of like, I just kind of brushed it off when he would do that to me. And now I'm kind of like, yeah, he's not going to do that to me anymore, because now I notice. Now I notice when he does it. So I think we have to be conscious ourselves of when it's happening, and not sweep it under the rug and say, oh, well, it was just a little thing. But there's a way, I think, it's just like anything. Like when someone comes to me with some constructive criticism, or there's a way where I'll get defensive and be like, well, but, and there's another way that they can bring it where I will be more open and like really receive what they have to say. So I think that is important, that we, look at that as well when we're bringing something out into the open, that we do it where they're not just saying, well, you're just a radical feminist, or and they're just making it about, then they end up deflecting it and making it about us.
I had a woman do that. So another situation where we were planning an event with evolutionary leaders, and there were several women, and literally we were talking about what wasn't working and what could work and how we would like it to go. And we brought up this feminine issue of, instead of being so patriarchal and hierarchical, I can't even say it, but hierarchical. So we were talking about that, and one of the women went to the men and said, oh, it's just a bunch of radical feminists. Mm-hmm. And that was so not what was happening at that table. It was so not accurate to the conversation about bringing the feminine in and integrating, making the feminine integral with the masculine. It's like that was the conversation of how do we really balance this and bring more feminine into it. And she went away like tattling that it was just a bunch of feminists at the table. But I have a reverse one too. I just thought of this. So I feel sorry for men, because they really, this is a big deal for the masculine to remake itself in radical cultural change, just like the feminine. And we all have masculine and feminine. This is about us, right? It's about all of us. But my husband just bought gifts for all of his staff. And he asked me to wrap them. Kind of a feminist thing, like, okay, a sexist thing that you do the wrapping because I'm not good at it. But I wrapped. So he gave everyone a card and cash and a gift certificate, except for the one male in the office, whom he just gave cash. Same amount of cash, but the gift certificate was for a massage.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I just thought of it, like now he's like, he didn't give the male, which is our son, the massage. And now I'm like, why? Cody would have enjoyed a massage.
Did he do it because he's a man or because he's his son?
Why didn't he make it equal? Why didn't he do it?
I don't know their relationship, but my thought was,
I think it was because he's a man.
Interesting.
Because he's a guy. Like maybe he wouldn't buy that for himself, but all the women enjoy massages. I'm going to ask him. But isn't that interesting?
Yeah, that is interesting. And this whole thing about gender roles in relationship to this, when you were talking about the woman in the meeting who just, was treated like the administrative person. But did she willingly take that role on? Because the other day I was at this networking thing, and there was a woman, and she kept talking about, she didn't really work for this man, so she wasn't an employee, but she was almost like a fan of his, and she was talking about him in a way that was, he does this and he does that. And she was really promoting this guy and encouraging me to meet him and all of this. And she was brilliant. She was this brilliant woman. We had this amazing conversation, except there was this feeling that she had kind of taken a back seat when it came to him. Like she was like letting him shine and she was kind of back here. And, I didn't know her well enough to, dive in deeper and see what that was all about. But she seemed perfectly willing to take that back seat. And it may have had nothing to do with gender, but it did make me curious about that and how women, and I've done it too. I was telling you earlier about this story about years ago. I was involved in this organization and we were volunteers, and it was a male public speaker, and the team that did event production, I was part of this team, and it was mostly men. And actually, I think at the time in this group, I was the only woman. And these guys, just the way they treated me, when I think about it now, they were just like, it was like I was a kid. And I was actually older than they, not by a lot, but I was actually older than they were. But they were always taking on all the leadership roles if there was someone needed to be introduced, or a master's of ceremony, or anything where the spotlight was going to be on, they always did it. And I finally, towards the end of me working with them, I said, I'd like to actually be up there and do the introductions one of these meetings. Oh yeah, when you get more experience. And I've been doing it almost as long as they had. And that was kind of the beginning of the end. But I never said anything. Back then I was kind of, happily, doing registrations, or happily, organizing things, or, I just did it because that was what I was used to doing. I was good at it and I could do it. So that's what I did. And that's what they told me to do. And it was just because they were guys and they had suits on that I did that. But, now I think about it and it's like, no, like I would have been brilliant up there as someone who was introducing, and but I didn't have that opportunity. So it was interesting.
Think about these subtle dynamics. Like, I'm just thinking, I can see you in that position. I can't see you not in your strong position of going, wait a minute, checking them, because that's the old you and that's not who I see today. But look at the conditioning for generations, for decades. And I'm thinking about, women who've had real hardcore harassment and our inability to speak up, and how important these subtle dynamics are, just as important. Like I said earlier, it's like you don't just wait for the big thing to happen, and the big thing almost makes us more shut down. Like, how do we confront this giant that's really big in the room when we can't even just relate to the subtle? It's like, wow.
Or even notice it. I think that like we've been so conditioned by it that we don't even notice that little feeling that like that didn't feel good. We're just like, there was I did this, I used to have a plus size boutique years ago, and I did an interview on the local radio station, and I went into the station, and they said, just sit there and he'll be with you in a minute. And, they were interviewing me about, why I opened the store and all of that. And I'd never met the host of the show, and he was turned with his back. His back was to me, and he was talking to me, but he didn't turn around and look at me. So he had no idea what I looked like. And he introduced me, still not looking at me. And then he turns around, he looks at me, And, he had already introduced me, and he looks at me and he goes, "So, Sherryl, you're not as big as I thought you'd be." And he's looking me up and down with this leer, like he's like leering at me. He's like, like, and I just was, luckily, I thought really fast on my feet because it was so uncomfortable the way he was looking at me. And I said, "Well," whatever his name was, "Well, Joe, I try to be as big as I can." And he laughed, and it totally disarmed him. But it's situations like that. Like, what do? Like, you're on air. Like, you say, like, say, "Stop leering at me. You're not going to do that while you're on. You have a mic and everything."
Yeah.
Like, you're disgusting. Like, how could you look at me like that? You don't know me. It was. Ugh.
And the comment was so inappropriate anyway,
Yeah.
let alone the way he was looking at you, the whole comment.
No, it was very, but the interview ended up going well because I had, disarmed him basically. So, I think that, the subtle things, that we don't notice, like, how do we disarm those so that they don't turn into bigger things and repeated treatment of us, as somehow objects, or as lesser, like that he actually thought it was okay to check me out, like, while he's doing an interview. It's just like, it made me wonder what else he had done to his other guests. Felt like, yeah, he had a creepy vibe.
I want to tell a happy ending story because I want to just invite our friends out there listening to think about those subtle dynamics and maybe even start making a list, when you're noticing them. Like, let's do that. I have a man, I have two experiences now. So let's do a kudos for the men right now. But I have two experiences in the last couple of weeks where I'll just give one. I was having a Zoom conversation with a male leader, role model, mentor of mine. And literally, when he asked me about an event, he's like, "Well, how did that event go?" And so I'm telling him, blah, 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 blah. And he said to me, it was just funny, "You're going to love this because of our tagline." He said, "Well, you really are a radical, aren't you?" And I thought, where is he going to go with that? And he said the nicest compliment of, "You're showing up to make a difference and you're really serious about it. Like, you're really serious about this." So that felt good to have a man as a mentor acknowledge that. But here's the one that really felt good was a man, again, role model, mentor. Oh man, I look up to him. I adore him. He's amazing on the planet. And he challenged me in a healthy, positive way and said, "We need strong female, feminine leadership. And we need that feminine voice. And I see that in you. Like, I peel away anything that you may think that you're presenting to me, and I really see that in you. Go for it. Go, girl." Like, the man stepping back to say, "I'm here to help rebalance it. And when I step back and you step forward, we're beginning something that will affect change on the planet." So, Julie, inviting me, you step forward, I'm stepping back, and we will be in harmony and balance again.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. So I do want to just leave us with that, a positive story, that this rebalancing of masculine and feminine, this radical cultural change that we're talking about, is not a women take all, leave the men in the dust kind of thing. This really is a partnership. This really is us waking to our own subtleties as well as them waking to their own subtleties. So we had the story of both. Like, the man that you talked with, he really had to look at himself. But so did we. I was on that meeting and I didn't say anything, but I noticed it. So, yeah. Do you want to say any closing remarks?
Just that I was just thinking about someone I know who used to go into big corporate muckety muck meetings and insist that they have a moment of prayer in the beginning. And she brought that, and they were very resistant at first, like, no. And it changed the whole way things went, and they got used to doing it, and you could kind of tell that they enjoy doing that. And that's the kind of thing that we have to be willing to do, like bring whatever it is. I mean, for her it was prayer, just because of her work in the world, that, you know, just bringing that. But it was a very feminine thing. Like, guys don't usually do that in a meeting, you know, a corporate meeting. But for her, it was a way that she could truly honor who she was and her piece of bringing that feminine energy forward. So it's I think that that's a piece of it too, this us being willing to take risks and say, before we go any further, I want to bring this piece that you're not used to, because our culture doesn't do that, but it's important and we need to do this.
Mm.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you, Sherryl Lin.
Thank you. And thanks to our viewers for tuning in today. And you can find out more about Julie and me and our website and information by looking at the bottom of the screen. And we wish you just the most amazing day, whatever you're going to do next. And we'll talk to you again soon.
All righty. Bye for now. Thanks for tuning in.